Parkinson's disease, part 6, the indirect pathway when it's normally functioning. So remember, in the indirect pathway, the purpose is to suppress movement, okay? But dopamine increases movement, right? So we're looking at this from the perspective of we are attempting to produce a voluntary movement, and we don't want our voluntary movement suppressed, okay? So the indirect pathway's goal is to suppress unwanted movement. So at rest, the globus pallidus externus inhibits the excitatory signals from the subthalamic nucleus that are being sent to the globus pallidus internus. So to initiate the indirect pathway, the motor cortex sends excitatory signals to the striatum. In turn, the striatum increases the release of GABA to the globus pallidus externus, therefore inhibiting the globus pallidus externus. So inhibition of the globus pallidus externus's release of GABA leads to disinhibition of the subthalamic nucleus, and then increases the excitatory signals to the globus pallidus internus. So, the globus pallidus internus increases its release of GABA, which means that the thalamus is inhibited and you get less unwanted movement being produced, right? So remember, the indirect pathway is trying to suppress unwanted movement, and through this process, we have successfully suppressed any unwanted movement. Now, when we want to do a voluntary movement, the subthalamic nucleus stimulates the substantia nigra with glutamate. And this time, in the indirect pathway, the substantia nigra produces dopamine as an inhibitory neurotransmitter to the striatum. So the striatum sends less GABA to the globus pallidus externus. You get increased release of GABA to the subthalamic nucleus. You get less excitation of the globus pallidus internus. Then you get less inhibition of the thalamus, greater production of glutamate to the motor cortex, or greater excitation of the motor cortex, which leads to more movement. And remember, that's voluntary movement. So the production of dopamine here, when we want to do a voluntary movement, has effectively overcome the indirect pathway's purpose so that it doesn't suppress our desired voluntary movement.